morning, everybody, and thank you for all the people who are sitting here in front and all the people who probably are listening at the back. Which is very popular on the social media. And my attempt for the next 15-20 minutes is really to deep dive into some of the facets that I picked up from the social media and hear your views. She's actually authored a book, I Am HR, and she speaks about stereotypes about HR there and how can HR reclaim their work and reputation. Would love to sort of hear from you as to what triggered you to write that book first and maybe one or two myths that you want to bust.
I love it. Well, everybody, my name is Laurie Ruettimann, and if you don't follow me on social media, that's okay. I'm very boring. But I like to talk about human resources professionals and what makes them tick and what motivates them. And there are a lot of stereotypes around human resources. For example, that we don't like risk, or that we're mean, or that we hate our employees secretly. We're trying to make them miserable. When in fact, we are employees. We have our own challenges, and by solving our own problems and making our own employee experience better, we're helping the organization. But a lot of times, we're just the bad guys. We're just, we're in charge of causing trouble. Or when we get involved, things become exponentially harder. So those are some of the stereotypes that I tried to break in my book. Who cares if the CFO likes you? If you're doing good work, you're doing good work for the organization, and the enterprise will benefit from it. So don't be afraid of your CEO. He's probably just a bully. You need to stand up to him.
Do you think technology will help HR say no easier?
I think data helps you say no. So in any event where you can have data or information to make a claim, that's always helpful in standing up to a CEO who's profit-driven and not people-driven. But I think more importantly, technology can help us to build friends and relationships. So for me, the reason why I'm here today is because of the great relationships I've made over Twitter and Facebook, so I can speak with you and we can learn from one another and share ideas. So technology will broaden your horizons, open up your professional development opportunities, and hopefully help you to figure out how to grow a spine and be competent and learn how to say no when appropriate.
And maybe that's the reason in one of your blogs you actually said HR is a calling. Would you elaborate on that?
Yeah, HR definitely is a calling. You have to love what you do in order to do human resources, because this job will beat you down every day. You'll come into work and people will complain to you. It can make you very cynical and eat away at your soul. That's how I felt after doing human resources for 12 years, which is why I quit and opened up my own company, and for the past 8 years I've been doing consulting on my terms. Now, had I had a wonderful group of people like this, I may have kept my job, I may have had friends, but back then there was no social media, there was no Twitter, there was no Facebook, and I ended up feeling very alone and very overwhelmed. I had no work-life balance. So for me, technology is one of the pivotal things that you can use to try to find friends and have some work-life balance.
You mentioned the word cynical, and just for the benefit of everybody, she's got a blog, The Cynical Girl, and she actually talks of that it's very difficult to be a cynical person.
It is. I think everybody thinks it's easy to be cynical, but when you're cynical, you are actually a secret optimist because you know things can get better, and it's very frustrating to you on a daily basis to put up with mediocrity and stupidity and people doing things the wrong way. And oftentimes HR becomes, they do something called learned helplessness. They feel paralyzed. They feel like they can't fix anything. And if there's one challenge that I would put out there to anybody out on human resources, if you see someone who feels helpless and a victim and works in HR, they need a mentor. They need you because they need to be shown that HR can be liberated, HR can be strong, HR is strategic, and HR can make really great business decisions.
You spoke about technology. Just wanted to hear your views on do you see the play of technology varying depending upon the culture of the organization or culture of the country?
I feel the adoption of technology definitely does vary based on size of the organization, based on the age of the organization. But I think there are many people out there who are hesitant to learn about cloud computing or who are hesitant to learn about social media because they think they're too old or they just haven't done things that way before. And that is a lie we tell ourselves to protect ourselves from failure. Technology is appropriate for any size HR organization and any size of a company. And I certainly think it starts by asking really good questions. And the first question I ever asked is, what the hell is cloud computing? Where's the cloud? Like, I had no idea. But because I asked that question, my whole life changed. And I think if we can just be humble and admit that we don't know things, we open ourselves up to learning opportunities all day long.
A lot of Indian organizations, we have our own employees in different parts of the world. And when we send them across to those roles, we do some sort of a sensitivity preparation, how to deal with cultures, etc. Do you think with the advent of social media, it's become more neutral? Or are there sensitivities even on the social media across different countries?
I think that's a great question. I think human beings are inherently weird, and we don't assume good intent enough. And in my country, in America, we're always afraid of offending people, and yet we use social media and we say the worst things to one another. I don't know why. Yeah, we do. We get anonymous and invisible, and we use this technology to bully people. And I've seen this in the UK and in France and in Germany. And I think there is some training that happens human to human, people to people, where we almost have to retrain ourselves to make a connection and look people in the eye and have honest conversations without tearing people down. So in that way, sensitivity training is more important than ever, but it's not just sensitivity training, it's conversations on how to be respectful, how to treat people with dignity, how to make sure that you're giving feedback, but it's appropriate feedback and not just random feedback that picks on somebody. We can all benefit from that, all of us.
In another of your blogs, you've spoken about influencing and mimicking. I'd love to hear that, because they're two very diametrically opposite words. In the sense that one word was, there's nothing wrong with mimicking.
No. So I'll just clarify. Out there on social media, you will have, or in any company, you have one really great person. Maybe they wear red. They wear a red dress. And you think, I would look good in red, and you start wearing a red dress, and she starts wearing a red dress, and suddenly we're all just mimicking someone who's a trendsetter. That happens at work, it happens in our families, it happens on social media all day long. I think it's okay to be inspired, but when you are inspired, make sure you give credit where credit is due. And so for me, there are so many trailblazers. Many of them are here today, like Jerry Crispin and China Gorman, who are my colleagues in the United States. And I try to copy them because they're awesome and amazing and they inspire me. But I give them credit, and then I try to take what they've taught me and make it my own. So it's about really recognizing the great work of other people and then trying to do better, trying to make a contribution to the world. Which is why for all of you, if you work in human resources or recruiting or talent acquisition, the best way that you can make a difference is you could learn to do what I do. You could write, you could speak. Why me? I'm just some dumb woman from America, right? You all are educated, you're brilliant, you're smart, you're talented. I would challenge all of you, if you're interested in making a difference, you need to speak and you need to get up on stage here next year. Don't have me back, take my place.
Good that you mention about giving credit. And actually I've observed that social media has facilitated that process. Today when you put a Twitter message, you actually give credit to who has said what.
Wait,
Facebook, you do tagging.
Unless you're Donald Trump and then you just plagiarize and you don't give credit. You know that's true.
How can technology play a role in personal branding?
Well, I have to tell you, I don't necessarily believe in personal branding because I have a soul. And brands are appropriate for candy or milk or laundry detergent. But you're more than a bottle of laundry detergent. You're a human being. You don't have a brand. You have a wholly differentiated personality. Social media can let that shine, and you can certainly use social media to tell people that you like HR, but maybe you also like skiing or some random activity. And you can share that, and it makes you interesting. But we should never forget that we're humans, and we are not products. We are not commodities. Our employees are not talent. They are human beings. And if we remember that, we do right by our organization, and we do right by the people in our organization. But social media and technology can definitely help me connect with people who have a passion for animals. I love animals. This is something that's very important to me in America and everywhere all over. There are too many animals, and I believe in aggressive ways to spay and neuter the animal population so that we're not hitting them on the road all the time in our automobiles. So that's something I'm passionate about, and I've been able to make human connections to further my philanthropic activities through Twitter and through Facebook and even through LinkedIn.
In fact, interesting, she talks about animals. I came across a research where, so in one of your blogs where you analyze the HR professionals.
Yes, right.
How many of them have single cat and a dog,
yes.
and what sort of HR professional has a Labrador? You want to talk about it?
Well, it's not my research. It was research that was done by a man by the name of John Sumser. And John Sumser found, at least in North American HR, most human resources professionals do have animals in North America. And we always laugh in America that you think they're crazy old cat ladies with 100 cats in their home, but that's not true. Most human resources professionals love dogs, and they don't just love one dog, they love 2 dogs or more. And they love little dogs, they love big dogs. But I definitely think one of the reasons why that's important, it speaks to the attribute of empathy. Human resources professionals who do this job well have sympathy and they demonstrate empathy. They understand human suffering, they understand suffering of animals, and inherently they just want to help.
Let's do a quick dipstick. How many of you have pets here?
Who has pets? Just a couple.
And how many of you like pets? You may not have pets, but like pets. Because in India, one of the constraints is you don't have the place to have pets.
Absolutely.
Actually.
Same thing in America, but people shove them in anyway. So.
You've spoken about somewhere about implementation of technology.
Yes.
And one of the examples you gave about learning management software. And what I found interesting was when you said, move it beyond just compliance.
Yeah.
Don't use LMS for compliance.
Yeah.
But can you sort of link it to the aspirations of people?
Absolutely.
Detail.
Well, one of the biggest differentiators between an engaged employee and a disengaged employee is whether or not they see themselves physically linked and emotionally linked to an organization. So career pathing becomes incredibly important. And for me, the opportunity with the learning management system is not just to train the employee to do the job today, but also to train the employee forever, wherever they want to go. 1 year from now, 3 years from now, whether it's within your enterprise or outside your enterprise. You know, for me, one of the biggest mistakes in my career very early on is that I focused on human resources to the exclusion of the other abilities and attributes that I had. And now I work quite a bit in the world of marketing. And had I known in my 20s that I was a good marketer, I might have pursued a graduate degree in marketing instead of learning it the hard way, which is what I had to do. So I think it's important to use learning management systems in conjunctions with assessments and also conversations, asking radically and candidly, where do you see yourself? And if it's not within this organization, that's okay. But while you're here, we want to give you an amazing employee experience. How can we help?
Speaking of conversations, want to hear your views on loneliness. On loneliness. Spoken about that also.
Yeah. Well, what are your views? Why am I doing all the talking? Tell me what you think.
We should all have time for being lonely. I prefer taking out time where I'm all by myself. And when I say all by myself, I'm with the nature. And when I'm with nature, it sort of helps you to reflect, reconnect with what you would want to do going ahead.
Well, I just read a study that people who connect with nature are happier in general. So it's important to get outside and be one with the universe, as much as, and as weird as that sounds for me to say that. But for me, loneliness is twofold. Loneliness can happen when you're surrounded by people, and in that case, it's tragic, but it's only a condition. It's not a permanent state of being. And loneliness, even when you're surrounded by everybody, can help you to think a little bit differently. And in many cases of the great Western artists, from Andy Warhol to Jackson Pollock, those artists were incredibly lonely but produced amazing work. We have such a push towards happiness in all of our cultures now, and happiness can be overrated. And if you're happy all the time, it's not happiness, it just becomes a permanent state of being. So loneliness is a nice parallel to give us some time away to think about who we are and what we believe in. I don't want to be around someone who's happy all the time. To me, that person is stupid. This world is complicated. You can't be happy all the time in a complicated world.
You've spoken about joy and happiness. How do you distinguish between what is joyfulness and what's happiness?
Well, these are deep philosophical questions. Thank you so much. I love that we're not talking about HR. You know, for me, there's great joy in my life at very sad and tragic moments. So when I left home for the final time and moved on with my life, I had such joy about taking that final step into adulthood, but it was scary and it was tragic for my parents for some reason. I have no idea why, but they acted like it was a huge deal. I think for me, joy is really about seeing someone who has reached or is going on the journey to reach their potential. And happiness is just kind of a reaction. Joy is more strategic. Joy sees the bigger picture. Joy is really about the known and the unknown, whereas happiness is just a fleeting emotion.
So we went really 30,000 feet. Let's come down.
Let's talk about recruiting.
So we all talk about implementing technology solutions. And in one of your blogs, you've spoken about 4 things for implementation. You've spoken about experience, external experience, third party, culture steward. So I would like you to elaborate on the culture steward part, on HR's role in implementation technology.
I stole that idea of being a steward of the culture from Dave Ulrich, and if you haven't read his work, it's seminal work on human resources, especially in the United States. But being a cultural steward really means understanding the prerogatives of your organization and what your employees need. And I think sometimes global HR tells us to implement software. Go ahead and implement SuccessFactors. Go ahead and implement Oracle, for example. And we in the local markets are like, holy cow, this really stinks. This software is no good. And there's a fine balance there because we've been given a global mandate, but we have local needs. And so it's important for HR to be brave and to be bold and to be authentic and to make sure we're communicating upward to our global counterparts to let them know our concerns. But not only that, any ways that we can mitigate the concerns or work around the concerns. So I think about a consulting engagement that I had where they were rethinking performance development and feedback. And in the India market, they had one way of doing it. And in the Philippines, they had another way of doing it. In Brazil, they had another way of doing it. And corporate said, I don't care, this is your new form. You're going to use it. So what they did, HR, they had to manage the needs of their local organization and pretend like they were doing the process, but they report back to New York that they were participating, but they still were the stewards of culture in the local market. So sometimes it's like a magic shell game. You have to just pretend that you're going along with what's happening out of New York or Los Angeles or Hong Kong, but you really have to protect your local employees.
It's your first trip to India and just few hours now in Delhi. So what's the sensing that you're getting after experiencing what you've seen for the last 4-5 hours? Any quick insights?
Well, you know what? Every type of human resources professional in Istanbul or in France or in Canada is represented in this room. I've talked to so many individuals this morning, and for as unique as we all think we all face the same challenges globally. We all are constrained on budget, we're constrained on time. As human resources leaders, we have our own families. We're trying to develop wonderful children and have great relationships with our spouses and working a million hours. And that's the same in India as it is in the Cayman Islands. It's the same everywhere. It's amazing how humanity follows the same pattern everywhere. And it's reaffirmed again today. People face the same challenges in India around managing Gen Y and Gen Z as they do, in Lisbon.
Okay, very fascinating, very inspiring to hear what all you're saying. I beg to differ on few of those things, and only for the sake of discussion. You talked about courage in addressing and dealing as HR leader with your managing director, board of leaders, stuff like that. I think that's what you meant. How would you probably say this true about certain territories, for example, territorial countries, for example, India, Philippines, Japan, where you have a specific set culture, where you don't speak loud, where you don't speak yourself, where you're not all by yourself in front of your leaders and you have to bow down in a way to kind of agree on what all they're saying. How do you behave as a HR leader with the kind of set thought process which you give?
You know what? Courage looks different in every culture, but courage can happen in a different system. You know, in America, you can't just tell your CEO to go take a hike, right? That's not how this works. But what you can do is you can build consensus, you can use data, and you can make a respectful case for change. But ultimately, I will give you this piece of advice. If you feel as if your company is going down one path, and it shouldn't, the way that you can make a difference is by quitting. Now, nobody likes to talk about this, right? Because nobody wants to quit their job, especially if they're well paid and they like their colleagues, and it's just a stupid differentiation with ethics. But when you leave, others take note. And it's not just leaving, it's doing it with dignity, and it's finding another job in another company that's relying on your insight and intelligence to grow. So whether you're passionate about corporate sustainability, corporate responsibility, if your company is not behaving according to your values, you need to be a leader and you need to leave. That is the single way in any culture you can make a difference.
Hi. So my question is on recruitment perspective. Let's say when we are going and hiring someone new, how do we get to know that that person is culturally correct for our company or not? If the person is not culturally correct, can he be trained enough to be culturally correct for the company?
That's a great question. Everybody is trying to figure that out. There are all these assessments out there where people are trying to, they say, we don't care about skill, we just want to hire for fit. Sometimes people lie. Sometimes people change, and also sometimes we're bad at hiring and we don't know what we don't know. In fact, they often say that for programmers, you can't hire based on culture. The only way you know if they're any good is to hire them, bring them into the office and have them do work, and you can figure out within 30 days whether or not they fit. So for me, the word we use in America is a crapshoot. We call it a crapshoot, like dice, crapshoot. So anyway, I really believe that there's no good way at this point to really hire for culture, and a lot of times what we do is we assuage our own fears by creating all of these processes. What I'm worried about is that some of our cultural fits are really ageist, sexist, racist, bigoted, and we just say it's our culture. I'm sorry, but we don't hire women over 50 or women who are short. So whatever the age is, whatever the difference is. But oftentimes we use culture as a code word for exclusion and bias, and I'm very worried about that. So.
In fact, in one of our blogs, to respond to your question, she actually speaks about radical candor and ruinous empathy.
Yeah, I stole that idea from somebody else. Give me credit. Yeah.
One message for young HR professionals.
Oh, I have a message for young HR professionals. You should get a hobby. Don't dedicate your whole life to this. I love human resources, but you're a much better HR professional if you do something else with your free time. In fact, you're just a better employee if you don't invest all of yourself into one thing, but you become wholly differentiated. So whatever it is you like, whether it's sport or whether it's mentoring or volunteering, do that and bring those experiences back into human resources. Number one, it makes you more empathetic and sympathetic, but number two, it makes you more interesting. And again, you don't burn out as quickly. Any of us, I'm 41 years old, and I was burnt out at HR when I was 32, because that's all I did, that's all I thought about, that's all I really wanted to do. And it gets really lonely at a certain period of time. You need a hobby.
One sort of concern most of us have is with the advent of technology and penetration, will we lose out on that human touch? Do you see that really happening, or eventually it will swing the pendulum back to a golden mean?
Well, you know, I do worry about losing the human touch. I worry that we start to become myopic with technology and think that our experience is everybody else's experience. And so for me, I found myself, you know, I'm self-employed. I own my own company. I'm currently working on a startup venture right now. And I found myself on my phone in front of the TV all the time, and my husband finally said, you need to look at me. You need to make eye contact with me. So now we have a rule, no phone in the bedroom, no phone in front of our TV room, and we have one TV in our home, and if that's on, if we're watching the news, if we're watching a movie, Netflix, no computer, no internet, because we need to make a human connection. Even though it never used to feel like watching TV with a spouse was a human connection, but that's what we do. So it's very important to take time off. Again, if you do one thing all the time, whether that's social media or play cricket or whatever it is, you become boring. Do a lot of different things, experiment with life, live a full life, and you'll be happier for it.
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you.
Thank you.
And what I can say is she's spoken from her heart. And the
Spoken
reason why I
something.
say she's spoken from her heart, very consistent with her own journey, life journey, whether she's spoken about animals, other interests, candor, I think it manifests in all that you have done.
I'm very passionate about the professional development of human resources leaders, and from what I've seen in the past, the HR progression has been disappointing. We have not had the leaders that we need to have, and so my goal is to inspire all of you to think about your career journey a little bit differently. If you are not going to be a chief HR officer or a VP of HR, that's okay. Make a difference and live a full and happy life in the process. And believe me, you will touch the human heart in more ways than being a VP of HR.
Last question. Do you see an HR leader ever becoming president of US?
No, not anytime soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.